The last part of the biology section that I want to cover is the immune system, partially because it's related to some of the stuff we're going to talk about in the hazard section, but also because of what's going on currently. With all of the COVID pandemic that's going on and flu season. I mean, you guys are college students and you are affected by the flu season every year. So I want to talk a little bit about the parts of the immune system and how they work. So the first thing is to talk about the actual parts. So who's involved in the immune system? And there's lots of different pieces and parts to this. So the first part is your bone marrow. Most people don't think about the fact that bone marrow is actually part of your immune system, but your bone marrow is actually going to produce your immune cells. So it's the one that's going to be producing your white blood cells. It produces things like platelets that help with injury. So that's where all of these guys come from that we're going to see in the two different main parts of the immune system. The thymus. Your thymus is one of the areas that white blood cells can go to mature. So they can mature in the bone marrow, but they can also be transported up to the thymus, up in this region right here, and hang out until they become fully mature so that they can then patrol the body as the white blood cells that are going to actually attack pathogens for us. The lymphatic system, this is a big part of our immune system. So this is the system that helps get those white blood cells around the body. So you can see that there are different parts of this system. The lymph nodes and lymph vessels are the major part of the system of the lymphatic system. The spleen is listed separately, but the spleen, as you can see, it's really closely linked to the lymphatic system, and it is actually part of the lymphatic system, or at least listed as part of the lymphatic system most of the time. The spleen is actually sometimes considered just like a giant lymph node. So what is this lymphatic system doing? So lymphatic vessels and nodes are transporting what we call lymph. I know, right? Lymph is fluid. And basically what it works to do is our capillaries and blood vessels leak. And so the lymph vessels collect that leaky fluid and return it back to our circulatory system. But it also, this fluid transports around our white blood cells. So it helps get them to different places in the body. And these lymph nodes that are in different locations, especially concentrated, you can see here in our armpits, in our throat region, here in our central body section near the spleen, and in our groin area. And then we've got a few like down here in our knees and so forth, but they're in these big groupings. These lymph nodes are basically hangouts for white blood cells. So you're going to find huge concentrations of white blood cells in those areas so that when they need to be deployed, they can go out. This is also, though, why when you're sick, these areas tend to get swollen and feel sore because those white blood cells are going crazy and you get swellings of the lymph in those regions. And so that's why when you have a cold or something like that, the doctor may be feeling your lymph nodes. That's an indication of infection because everybody's kind of going a little nuts in those areas, getting all geared up for the infection. And then your last part of your immune system is your skin. And this is actually a big part of our immune system because if the stuff can't get in, then it can't really harm you, right? So your skin is your first line of defense against any sort of pathogen. And the video I had you watch before this, from the Amoeba Sisters, they mentioned pathogens can be all kinds of things. Basically anything that can do damage to us internally that is microscopic, right? And some of them not so microscopic. There are worms and so forth that are also considered pathogens. So that's the immune system. So those are the parts of the immune system. So what are the, how is our immune system kind of laid out? Well, it consists of two sections, two parts. So we have what we call the innate immune system. So these guys are what we consider non-specific systems defenses. So these are not picky about what they attack. You can see over here, this guy's labeled a macrophage. That's one of the members of this group. Innate immunity is one that you come with, you pretty much out of the box. It's not programmed for any specific pathogen. So it will pretty much, if it recognizes a pathogen that's in its kind of deck of cards, then it will attack it. So these guys have, and we'll see that here in a second, they've got some receptors that will allow them to say, oh, you don't belong here, so I'm going to eat you. Or I'm going to send out enzymes to destroy you. And basically, these guys can identify that either you do belong or you don't belong, but they don't have a way to build up specific immunities to any specific pathogens. That's what the other part of our immune system does. The other part of our immune system is what we call the acquired immune system. So we don't come packaged with this one ready to go. We have to build up the acquired immune system over time. So this is a very specific defense system that responds to specific features of pathogens. And so we'll see, and you saw this in the Amoeba Sisters video too, these are the guys that are going to do things like make antibodies. So these are going to be the B cells and the T cells that they talked about in the video. So I'm not going to go into tons of detail about some of that stuff since they talked about it. I just wanted to talk about it in the terms of like what our textbook and what other sources might talk about, because they didn't call them by some of these names. So what makes up our innate immunity? And again, the video that started this section off talked about innate immune systems, that Amoeba Sister video, but it didn't really call it innate. So there's three parts to the innate immune system. One, your skin. So again, if the pathogens can't get in, then that's a way to defend yourself. That's a way to fight off those pathogens. So one of the ways that they can get past that barrier is if you have an injury, like a scrape or a break in your skin. If you get punctured, that can allow pathogens to get in. So we'll talk about that some when we get to the hazard section. But also, I mean, you eat them, you breathe them in, right? They get in through your eyes. There are routes that they can get in that are just normal everyday interactions for us with the world. So the skin will actually block a lot of pathogens, but it can't block all of them. And so that's why we need the rest of this innate immune system as well as our acquired immune system. So the next line with the innate immune system are our mucous membranes. So they mentioned these a little bit in that video. So our mucous membranes are found all over our body. So you're most familiar with your mucous membranes in things like your sinuses and in your eyes. So your eyes are constantly creating a layer of liquid across your eyes. And if you wake up in the morning with those little crusties, you know what I'm talking about. That is dried mucus. So that is basically trying to keep anything from making it past your eyeballs and farther in. And same thing with the ones in your nose and sinuses. They're collecting anything that you breathe in. Talked in earlier videos in this series about the cilia in your lungs, and that's actually what you're seeing here. So here, these yellow guys are the ones that are creating the mucus. So they are excreting the mucus so it can be trapping those pathogens and pollen and dust and so forth. And then here are the cells with the cilia. And so those guys will push that mucus up into the trachea and then into your esophagus so that it can be digested. The last part of our innate immune system are the innate immune cells. So the guy we just saw in that little cartoon, the macrophages. And so you can actually see one of those guys in action right here. It's just kind of just a general white blood cell. And you can see it's sending out its little tendrils out to grab these little bacteria out here, and then it'll pull them in and eat them. Now, the interesting thing about these guys, as well as your skin, as well as our mucous membranes, is that we don't think about this, but all of these guys actually have the ability to destroy some of these pathogens on their own. So innate immune cells, these guys are going to pull them in and they're going to eat them. So they do that by using things like enzymes. Enzymes are proteins, molecules that can break things apart or put things together, and they can do it very efficiently. Well, we also have enzymes in the mucus that's produced by our mucous membranes. So we've got in the mucus that's produced in our eyes and in our nose and other areas. So for example, the respiratory system, like what we see here. Also, we have them in our digestive system, our urinary and our urinary tract. All of those areas are going to produce not just mucus, but that mucus is going to contain enzymes as well, so that it can work on breaking down some of these pathogens before they get any farther. And our skin actually produces enzymes. It'll produce some enzymes and acids to help kill bacteria and fungi that might try and take up residence. We've got good guys, good bacteria that live there to take up space. But we do have enzymes and acids that our skin excretes to try and keep anybody who tries to come and invade under control before they would get out of control. All right. So how does this innate immune system work? Innate. So the innate immune system, if you get past the skin and the mucous membranes, it's going to trigger what we call the inflammatory response. And so this is kind of like a 5-step deal as far as how this works. So we've got a wound. So in this case, it looks like maybe a stick pin or something has gone in. And so the first thing that's going to happen is that damaged tissue is going to release histamines. And you saw this in the video. So those tissues, they told you in the video, it's mast cells, so it's specific cells in this area that's their job to say, hey, send out the warning. And so those histamines are going to send out the warning saying, hey, there's damage going on here. And this is going to do a couple of things. So this is going to increase blood flow to the area and make these capillaries leaky. Why would we want to do that? Well, leaky capillaries are going to make this area swell because it's going to allow more fluid to come in, and it's going to isolate this area and hopefully trap this bacteria and keep it here rather than it traveling into the bloodstream or into other areas nearby. So that's why when you get injured, even if it's something as small as a paper cut, it swells up. It's because you've got this inflammatory response going on, trying to protect the tissue around it. Those histamines, like you saw in the Amoeba Sisters video, are also kind of like, if you've ever watched Shark Week, they're like chum in the water for the innate immune cells, for those macrophages. And so those guys are going to come in, it's kind of like, they can smell it in the water, and when they get there, they then find the bacteria, and those innate immune cells are going to attack those pathogens. And so they're going to, as you can see here, they're going to consume them. And if all goes well, as far as the battle between these guys, the innate immune cells are going to win, and your wound will heal up. Now, sometimes you may have noticed that your wound will kind of leak some kind of whitish, yellowish goo. We call that pus. And that is usually not such a bad thing, because what that is dead tissue and dead bacteria that have been taken care of. You also might get some dead innate immune cells coming out with that. And so that's what that material is. So that's the introduction kind of to the immune system, the innate immune system. I'm going to do a little bit in the next video on the acquired immune system. I know that they talked a little bit about that in the video, so I'm just going to briefly go through some of that and also talk some about vaccines because that's, big in the news, but also big just in general. Vaccines are a big part of our lives today and also, in the past. So we'll talk about that in the next video.